Since last summer, Americans have seen their investments shrink and their property values plummet. At the heart of the problem is something called the subprime mortgage crisis, which continues to ricochet through the economy. It sounds complicated, but it's really fairly simple. Banks lent hundreds of billions of dollars to home buyers who can't pay them back. Wall Street took the risky debt, dressed it up as fancy securities, and sold it around the world as safe investments. If it sounds like a shell game or a Ponzi scheme, in some ways it was. A house of cards rife with corruption, greed, and negligence. And as we reported in January, it started in places like Stockton, California. Stockton, California is a city of 280,000 people in the Central Valley, 80 miles east of San Francisco, 80 miles north of San Jose. In many ways, this is ground zero for the current financial crisis and a microcosm for everything that went wrong. A few years ago, it was one of the hottest real estate markets in the country. Today, it's the foreclosure capital of America.
If you see a real brown lawn, sometimes you can determine whether or not it's a foreclosure.
How many properties do you have right now?
102.
All in foreclosure?
Every single one of them.
Real estate agent Kevin Moran gave us a tour of the wreckage in one subdivision called Weston Ranch.
There's a foreclosure.
Block after block of vacant and abandoned houses. If you see a for sale sign in this neighborhood, that probably is a sign of distress, right?
I would say that, yeah, 2 out of 3 of all the sales are probably foreclosed properties and or people who are in distress.
The for sale signs and the overgrown lawns in Weston Ranch are only a small part of the picture. To get a real overview, you need to look at this map from Sean O'Toole's website, foreclosureradar.com, which tracks distressed properties in Stockton and other California communities.
And the light blue circles are folks that have gone into default. That means that's the first step of the foreclosure process. The dark blue are auction properties. That means an auction date has been set for the property. And the red icons are properties that were sold at auction, had no bid, and therefore went back to the lender.
Last January, there were 4,200 Stockton homes either in default or foreclosure. $1.4 billion in bad loans in just one California community. And it was far from being over. 2 months from now, what's this map going to look like? How many of those light blues are going to be red?
So we'll probably see at least 60–70% of these light blues turn red, and we'll see at least this many light blues again.
Banks are auctioning off houses all over California, and in South Florida, and in Nevada, and in parts of Ohio and Texas.
Sold at $295.
The result of a huge real estate bubble that began forming in Stockton back in 2003. When people priced out of the Bay Area and Silicon Valley discovered that you could buy a 4-bedroom home here for just $230,000. Developers started turning asparagus fields into subdivisions, and lenders handed out free money to anyone who wanted to buy. What do you mean by free money?
I mean free money. I mean you had to apply not to get a loan, almost.
Jim Grant is the editor of Grant's Interest Rate Observer and one of the country's foremost experts on credit markets.
When you opened your mailbox in 2004, 2005, you could barely unstuff it. People were pressing on you, if you were not institutionalized, all manner of schemes in which to expand your personal debt. You could, and many did, borrow more than 100% of the price of a house with the most fragile set of financial bona fides.
Hard to prove your income, self-employed, foreclosure, or bankruptcy?
Most of the mortgages issued in Stockton, and half of those now in default or foreclosure, were something called subprime loans, meaning less than prime quality. The borrowers often had sketchy credit, were financially strapped, or lacked sufficient income to qualify for a standard mortgage. After a year of artificially low payments, the interest rates on subprime loans jumped all the way to 10 or 11%. But Jerry Abbott, who runs the Coldwell Banker office in Stockton, says it didn't concern the borrowers, many of whom were getting mortgages for more than their houses were actually worth.
They were getting loans in excess of 100% of the value of the property. So most of them were actually putting a little bit of money in their pocket at close of escrow.
Really?
Yes.
So they were getting paid to buy a house?
They were getting paid to buy a house. Yes, yeah.
And strangely enough, it didn't seem to bother the lenders either, who were collecting huge fees just for landing the loans.
Whatever they wanted to state for their income, the bank accepted that at face value and made the loan based on that income.
Just gave them the money.
Just gave them the money.
No down payment.
No down payment.
Jim Grant calls it an invitation to fraud.
You apply to a bank or a mortgage broker for a loan, and you would fill out a form, and you would say, I have an income of, $400,000 a year. They say, you do, fine, just sign right there. Because they're being paid not by the veracity of the information, but by the consummation of the deal. And the lending officer would say, you have verified this? Why, yes, we have. And the lending officer would say, great, so do I. And he'd pass it on to Wall Street. Now,
And he got a cut too.
Yes, oh yes, everyone gets a cut.
Almost all of the people involved in the transactions made huge amounts of money, then passed the risk on to somebody else. Instead of keeping the dicey loans in their own portfolios, the big banks and giant mortgage companies that originally underwrote them sold them off to big New York investment houses. Firms like Bear Stearns and Merrill Lynch sliced the loans into little pieces, packaged them up with other investments, then sold them to their best customers around the world as high-yield mortgage-backed securities, turning sow's ears into silk purses, all with the blessing of the rating agencies like Standard & Poor's.
At every step in the way, somebody has his or her hand out getting paid. The broker got paid, he or she was happy, the lending officer ditto, the rating agencies got paid for passing judgment on these securities. They too were pleased and the stockholders were happy. And on, and it would never end, except that it did.
It was all predicated on the idea that real estate prices would keep going up and up and up, and for a long time they did. But by the summer of 2005, speculators flipping houses in Stockton had helped drive the price of that four-bedroom house to more than $400,000, and the market began to soften, then to tumble. All of a sudden, those subprime borrowers who had taken the free money found